in San Quentin, I had a job in education as an education clerk. And I'd been laying low. Like, there's rules in San Quentin. If you don't want to get killed, one, don't get involved in the heroin business. Right? Don't be fronting drugs to people or owing people. That's one rule. Two, don't be chasing after someone else's punk, right? I mean, that's another one of these.
Was a lot of that going on?
Well, not a lot, but if somebody was that way inclined and you were trying to, you know, cut his grass, so to speak, well, you know, I mean, that was a problem. But of course, the overriding problem was this race stuff. I mean, that was the height of the race war. So the AB, they made themselves famous because they were the smallest tip, but they would always make the hit. And it got to the point right before I got there where they were just going out every morning and hunting blacks. The doors would crack open and these guys would find somebody to stab.
Jesus.
Because basically they wanted to terrorize the blacks into like a peace treaty. The problem was, do you know how the AB was started?
No, can you please tell us how the AB was started? I have a general idea, but you were in Cali, and that Cali was where they started, so you probably got a lot more information than me.
Well, basically what happened is some of the older cons who've been in jail for a long time, they were all right because they've been in jail and they know people. But the Mexicans, I mean, the Chicanos and the blacks were just predating these young whites. And even whites who normally would have been okay, just, they had no hope because these black gangs were deep. I mean, they could put together 50, 100 members and they were all over the place. And, how many friends do you have? They're going to like fight to death with you, right? So, I mean, so these guys, they decide we've got to do something. And there was some guys that belonged to some Irish, I think it was some biker gang or something, but they had the Shamrock, you know?
Yeah.
And it started from a core of about 6 to 10 of these guys who said, we've got to do something. And they started, so what they did is they're very selective. They only wanted guys who wouldn't, embarrass the tip, right? And to do that, they had to see not just one heart check, but they had to see the guy go through a lot of stuff. I mean,
Get blood on his steel.
well, I mean, that one guy, the most famous AB guy, was the one who he's down forever in that Supermax.
There's something on YouTube with him on
Yeah,
his,
he
is there?
took
Yeah.
out 2 guards in making his hit.
Wow.
They interrupted the play, and so he took them out too. And of course, I think he's just 24 hours a day lockup for he's been there like 30 years. Anyway, so the AB, they got recognized as being a prison gang by the guards. And as soon as that happened, they started getting taken off the main lines and sent to Folsom. So then they started getting smarter. And the guys didn't announce they were AB. They played it cool and laid back in the cut. Or they said, well, I'm not involved in that anymore. Or maybe they'd cover up a tattoo or something. Because otherwise, I mean, you were just throwing your hands up and said, here I am, take me away, right? For, all day in isolation. You just go to the adjustment center, AC, and you'd be there forever. So the AB represented the whites, but they weren't, I mean, as an ideology, what do they represent? I mean, for them, the blacks were, what do they call them? Well, toads, hams, ham bones, spear chuckers, chimps, whatever you want. I mean, it was just abuse all the way around. And their idea was if one white gets stabbed, then we go stab a black. It doesn't really matter who it is. Anybody will do. Well, the end result of that is just going to be total anarchy. And like, how can anyone do their time in a situation like that? So for me, it was very simple. If you were fucking with me, then you had a problem with me. And I had a problem with you. And we'd work it out somehow. But I'm certainly not going to go out. Well, to give you an example, After I got out of North Block, after that stabbing, this Nazi tip came from Soledad after a race riot, about 8 of them. And they came onto the line in San Quentin. And the word came back to me that they were saying either I had to make a hit on some blacks or I had to check in. That was where it was. And as soon as I heard that, I said, well, we got to do something. So I talked to a friend of mine. I said, where are they? And he said, well, they're down on the yard near the old garden. And so we went down there, my friend and I. And there were 5 of them there. And they became, I think you might know the name, the Nazi lowriders.
Yeah.
That was where it started with those guys. And so I went down there, and the guy's sitting there, the leader of them. And I said to him, you know who I am, and you know why I'm here. Now, I don't hold with that racist bullshit. I don't have any tattoos. I ain't going to stab somebody I don't know. I'll stab somebody who fucks with me. So the question is, are you fucking with me? Because if you are fucking with me, we can deal with it right now. And he just looks at me. And the other ones just look at us. And that's it. That was the end of it.
It was squashed.
So it was like, I mean, we were fighting, people like me were fighting a losing battle because that racist gang stuff came out of, well, the AB were like that, but they didn't try and control the whole prison. But that racist gang stuff that you're describing comes out of those people in youth authority who then 20 years later are, 30-year-old convicts, whatever, 40-year-old convicts. And then they try and force everybody into that scene. But when I was there, you could still, if you were up for it, I mean, if you didn't mind confronting him right there on the moment, then
yeah, it's become a massive murder for hire and drugs business in and out of prison now across the country, hasn't it? Quick question on something you mentioned. You said that if they saw the ABs were patched in, if it was obvious they were ABs, they sent them over to Folsom. Yeah. Why did they send them to Folsom?
Well, they had to send them somewhere. Okay. They didn't have Pelican Bay or those, high-tech adjustment centers. So Folsom had an adjustment center. San Quentin had an adjustment center, but there were only so many cells. And if you bag up a whole prison gang, how many guys is that going to be? 50, 100? Where are you going to put them?
Yeah.
So Folsom is a good choice.